Welcome to Chautauqua People. My name is Ira Cooperman, and our special guest today is Doug Miller, or Douglas A. Miller, or Douglas Miller. At any rate, Doug is a photographer who became a filmmaker, and he's still a photographer, right? Doug is one of four brothers. Greg, Jeff, and Dan are the other brothers. Hope they're watching. And you've been at Chautauqua ever since you've been 4 years old. Is that right, Doug?
That's right. When I first arrived up here from near Pittsburgh's town called Steubenville, Ohio, where I grew up, where I was raised. So it's not that far, you know, it's about 3.5 hours.
No,
well, it's got a lot closer, right? Then it was maybe 4 hours away,
Right.
now it's
Definitely
less
closer.
than 3.
And we allow people from Ohio here in Chautauqua County. Yeah, it's okay.
A few.
And your dad was the one that discovered Chautauqua. That's the reason the whole family has been here, and most of your brothers, I mean, all of your brothers have grown up here, right?
Yeah, well, he came up here when I was about 4, so that would have been very into the 50s, and he just fell in love with the place like many people do in the area, and just decided, even though he didn't really have the money for it or anything, he said, I just want to bring my family up here in the summer.
Sure.
I want to bring my kids up here. And, that was the era where it was, a lot less expensive, and the family would come up, basically the family would be there in the summer, and the dads would commute. And that's the way my friends were, and that's the way all of us were.
Sure.
Our dad might be there a couple weeks, but mostly it was up, and we'd be there in the summer, and our gang of guys would, our crowds would, we'd be back year after year.
And the four of you worked here at Chautauqua. What are some of the jobs you had as a 16, 17-year-old?
Yeah, I had all these crappy jobs, which, because you need a summer job, right, when you're all the way
Right.
through high school and college. So I washed dishes first couple summers, and that was a great job. But then they tore the hotel down. It was the North Shore Inn Hotel. That was a great place. And the guys I worked with, one of the guys, still my friend, he's an attorney in Chicago. Those are the kind of fellow dishwashers you had there at Chautauqua.
Cool.
And then I worked at Norton Hall. I swept out the Opera House. I did maintenance. I, painted lines. What else did I taught photography. I worked in the art gallery.
And you worked at the Daily, right?
I worked at the Daily.
newspaper?
Yes, I worked for the Daily as a
Chautauqua
writer
Daily.
and a photographer there.
Right.
And it was just each season you're sort of trying to figure out what can I do.
What I
That's a
find
good
most
summer
amazing
gig.
is that you and your 3 other brothers all married girls that you met here at Chautauqua.
Yes. Well, too much time on our hands. And back then, drinking age was 18. I mean, I'm kidding. I don't know, but we all did, and it's been good for our family. And it's not that uncommon, in Chautauqua, because what makes it good is that, all the wives want to come. So
Right.
it's just us, and so all of them come. And we all have kids. So now all the kids come and they all see each other, and they have all these houses they can run around to, and it's a whole family Chautauqua,
Yeah. So
mafia we got going.
how many children are there of all 4?
10. There's 10, and
10
my
children.
own daughter was the first marriage, and
Right.
she got married 2 weeks ago in Chautauqua.
This summer, June 14th,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Right. That's great.
14, as they would say. And so they got married here, big wedding before the season, lots of fun, lots of people from all over.
That's great.
Yeah.
Was it in the Hall of Philosophy?
No,
or
it was
out
in
on-
the ravine, in the woods, under the canopy of trees. Luckily, we had nice weather, and then everybody strolled down to we have a friend who's a musician who played this pipe and drum, and he marched everybody down the lake.
Cool.
To the bell tower where we had the reception. And then when they tossed us out of there, we went up to our house
That's
for more
great.
reception.
Yeah. Weddings at Chautauqua are not that unusual. They have a lot of
No, it's
weddings
gotten
every
more
year.
common, but
Yeah.
now there's outside people. It used to be pretty much the only people that wanted to get married. There were people who were attached to it.
Right.
Like 3 of my brothers were married there. The only reason I wasn't married there was because my wife's dad was a Presbyterian minister in Pittsburgh, and that was that. So that's where we got married. But he was a Chautauquan. Anyway.
That's okay.
We have this big Chautauqua connection, and in the area, too. We like the area.
And then after you left Chautauqua, you went off to college, and you graduated from the State University of New York at Purchase, right?
Yeah, at Purchase, which is just north of New York City there.
Is that where you first started being interested in photography?
No, I was always interested in photography. I don't know where that got started. And then I got really interested in filmmaking. They had a series called The Film Generation on PBS. I don't know what's ever happened to it. But back then I saw a lot of student film. This would have been in the really long time ago, late 60s, but it was very exciting. I was doing still photography already, and and back then, if you were willing to do it, and you could do the darkroom, you could do all the stuff. It was much more technically. If you could just do it, they wanted you at places. I could come to the day, I can do I can get it together, I can shoot it. I know all the technology, and so. But I went to purchase study film mostly, but I've always done still photography but then I became a filmmaker, and that's what I was really wanting to do.
I know you've done a lot of freelance work as a cameraman, as a photographer, screenwriter, editor for TV, feature films, documentaries. You traveled all over the world, Japan, Vancouver, Paris. But I was most interested, is it true that you and your wife Carol moved from Boston to Los Angeles because you didn't want your young daughter Marin to grow up with a Boston accent?
Yes, well, that's what we say. She was starting to say, clean the flour, shut the door. I'm like, no way, that's it. We're out of here. We're moving to LA. No, we moved to LA because we were in the film business and we had to be there.
Yeah.
Right. So was it. So therefore, we determined we're going to like it. And we do like it.
Tell us a little bit about what your wife does, because I know she's also in the business. She's in the film
business. She's in a different part of the film business. She's in the feature, Hollywood actor and actress, that kind of movie film business.
Big
and
time.
She's a costume designer, so she works with the big stars making the big movies, and that's a whole other world from what I deal with, because I'm in documentary, which is smaller and separate. But it means that both of us, though, are freelancers, and both of us have to travel, and we have to work it out at raising our kid. And now, of course, now she's moved on. She's even married. She went to college.
Right.
But it was difficult because we both had freelancers. We'd often be unemployed. We'd have to work out with each other's schedules. We'd often have to travel for work. She had to do a lot of movies up in Canada there for a while. They were making a lot of films up there.
But it must have been fun for your daughter to be in different countries.
Yeah,
I remember you mentioned
it's when they're
Japan.
little, you have to work on them. You have to mess with their heads and make them like it. It's not natural. They want to just hang around at home and be there and not be hassled, really.
Right.
Like I used to have discussions in Paris. I'd be walking down, like the Rue Rivoli, and Mary would be saying, "I want to go back to Ohio," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, we're not going."
Right.
Yeah, but we will, but not now. You're not going to talk me out of moving. You're not going to talk me into moving from Paris. I like Ohio, but I'm not moving from Paris to go back there.
I wish we had some of your photography from Paris, because I've seen some of your beautiful black and white photography that you've done.
Well,
did you like Paris?
People can go. I love Paris. We were very fortunate. I got to live in Paris a number of times for a number of months at a time on sort of different projects. And we took our daughter there. We put her in a French school. I did this photography project where I traveled all around the city, trying to see it as the turn of the century. So yes, Paris was great, and we really enjoyed it. And I'd like to go back, but if people, I was going to say, if people are interested, they can go onto my website where I've posted some of my essays, and it's called DougAMiller.com. All you have to do is type that in.
Yeah, we should put that up on the screen.
DougAMiller.com, and then you can see, scan through my essays. It's all free.
Right, no dots, folks, just DougAMiller.com.
And the only rule is you can't watch it on a little screen. It has a little thing that if you try to watch it on your phone, it sets it on fire. So don't even try.
You have to have a
nice screen.
Big screen. Okay, that's wonderful. Well, you've done some feature films. You've been involved in some wonderful films. Last June 26th, you showed a documentary called "Betty Page Reveals All." That was a fascinating film. You want to tell us how that came about?
Well, every project, for us in documentary film, there's always a million subjects. Like right now, I could tell you 20 films I'd like to make. But we have to make the films we can get funded.
Sure.
So I was with a friend, Mark Moria, who I've worked with on various projects and involved in some political things, and he ended up doing these interviews, a couple interviews with this woman named Betty Page, the biggest, model of all time, probably pinup model, and before she died, and he wanted to make them into a film, but she refused to go on camera. She would only do them on. She's super protective of her look, her incredibly beautiful look. And so that's all we had was just a couple, interviews, rambling by an older lady. What is that? And then so my job is to come in and try to make that into a movie, try to make a coherent narrative out of her rambling interviews, and then provide the pictures to make it work and make a whole film. And she was an interesting person, and so I just got more involved in it. I didn't think I would. Most of my stuff's much more serious subjects, but. I did find her very interesting, and I'm also, as a photographer, it was very interesting. She really knew, she's probably the best person at working the camera there's ever been. And there's some interest in that, too. And, it was just all native. I mean, she didn't think this through. It just sort of
What was so unusual, though, about Betty Page? I mean, here she was a model, but what made her so
that's sort of what the big ideas are what interested me in the movie, and one of them is that. Why is she better than the thousands of women who have done this? And she demonstrably is. You could look through these books of compilations of different photographers, and she just does stand out. It's just a combination. She was very comfortable with her body. She was very sexy. She was very natural. She had no entourage, no helpers, no trainers, no makeup person. She made her own clothes. But the real key was she was very bright, street bright. She was a very smart person, born dirt poor, worked her way up, and was, what is it, salutatorian? We're in the high school. What is it? Salutatorian? What's the word?
Yeah, something
of her
like
high
that.
school.
Yeah.
Almost a valedictorian.
She 1 point, right?
Yeah,
Just she.
less than. And so when she was working as a model, this is my theory, she was 30, passing it as 22.
Right.
And I think the other people were all 22 or 23.
So
and
she was much brighter.
But you see it in her eyes when you look at her. To me, you see it in her eyes. There's always plenty of bimbos and they're endless. But this is a person that you really felt you wanted to hang out with, and it was true that you did. She was an interesting person, and I think that comes across in her eyes, which is the key to a lot of these pictures. Even though we think about the body, but
she did have a beautiful body.
But she did. But
She
it was the
was
whole
gorgeous,
picture, and mostly you see her full body in the pictures that we have, which was a constant problem, because when you're shooting widescreen like this is widescreen right now, and she's like this in every picture. It's a pain in the butt to try to make it work visually. But that's a different story.
Well, it was
These are the kind of things we confront that we never imagined.
the movie was really well received. You got a review in the New York Times. Didn't they say nice things about it?
Oh yeah, LA Times. We were one of the best reviewed movies of last year in this thing called Rotten Tomatoes, which has a compilation. They compile all the film reviews. Of course, the reason is, frankly, is we didn't get any 5 stars from anybody, but we didn't get any 1 or 2s either.
Negatives, right.
Everybody said either 3 or 4, so that's pretty good if you don't have any terrible reviews. So anyway, it did well. It's been in distribution. It's now being shown overseas. There's a lot of interest in her in Europe, in Asia. She's very popular over there.
Well, it's been shown in New York and Los Angeles, and now at the Chautauqua
the Chautauqua
Institution.
Cinema, which was great.
Yeah.
I love that theater, having been raised in Chautauqua.
Isn't
And
it
that's
great?
probably why I became a filmmaker, was because of that theater. I mean, I don't know if that's why, but
You were
I
influenced.
I really enjoyed the movies, and they back then showed, and still do, showed interesting movies, not just, just interesting. He would go out of his way to find challenging, intelligent movies that would be exciting, and, to show Fellini or Bergman or any of those people was a great movie.
The cinema is not our main focus, but Billy Schmidt's grandfather.
Yeah, it's been in the same family for 3 generations.
3 generations, and the current operator of the cinema and owner is Billy Schmidt, who does a wonderful job. Comes all the way out from San Francisco and shows really interesting, mostly independent films.
He picks things but there are also things Chautauqua audiences want to see. Maybe people say, "Oh, he's not going to show Transformers." I said, "Yeah, that's what's great," but maybe Chautauquans wouldn't go much to that.
You think he'll show Horrible Bosses if it ever comes out, or Horrible
Bosses 2? Well, if we ask him, he might.
Now those were 2 movies that you were involved in. What
my
did you
wife
do?
did.
Oh, your
she
wife
was the costume designer.
She was the
Costume designer for both of those movies. The second one hasn't come out yet, but she's done. She did Meet the Focker. She did the original Santa Claus movie. A film many people would know her for costume work was a movie called Dodgeball, comedy.
And what name does she use when for
Carol Ramsey? Carol Ramsey.
Carol Ramsey. Okay.
Even though we've been married for 35 years at least. Yeah, we never changed her name, but and she's a Chautauquan. I mean, she's come up here every summer her whole life too. And she's the oldest with 2 younger brothers. I have 3 younger brothers. That's what we have in common.
Well, Horrible Bosses and Horrible Bosses 2,
Yes.
movies to look for.
Yeah.
And
Well, they're fun. They are funny. They're
and
stupid.
They
but
were
they're
with,
funny.
what, Jennifer Aniston? And,
Jennifer Aniston.
and Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, and all these guys.
I
Chris
mean, these are
Pine.
big time
Oh,
guys.
yeah, Carol's got to
Colin
work with the
Firth.
Barbara Streisands and those people of the world
cool.
and the De Niros, and I'm out working with,
Documentaries.
dead celebrities.
A lot of dead people. That's all right. Yeah. What
I'm
about?
looking at the the World War II footage in a dark room,
That's all right.
but I liked it. So
You've done a lot of interesting things. No, you really have. I've seen some of your things that are on the History Channel. You're listed there as Douglas Miller, producer. I mean, that's a big deal on a History Channel. When the History Channel used to do history.
yes, this is when they used to do history.
not
so
quite
now
doing
they're
the same thing
no,
anymore.
They basically have abandoned
Yeah.
doing, and now they just do reality. I mean, Discovery doesn't do Discovery, and Learning Channel doesn't do
Yeah,
Learning, and
it's a shame.
A&E doesn't have any arts involved. They're all in reality shows because
Right.
reality shows are cheap.
But I think the way you did The Color of War, the way you found color news reels, it was amazing. How did you first come across that, the business of The Color of War?
Well, it was what happened. That was, again, back when History Channel was, we were actually in those days told, do a good job and make a good show, and that's
Right.
that's sufficient.
They
And
let
so they
you-
said, go find this footage. Here's what happened. I don't want to talk too much about the technology, but the problem with color film back then is it was very hard to duplicate. Most movies were in black and white, right? Now, digital computer solves all that. It doesn't care if it's a slide or a negative or a print or a piece of film or if it's color. It's all mixed together. So now we could get all this footage, and it would be 16 millimeter, and it would be 35 millimeter, and all these things. Now in the digital world, we just transferred it to us, and then we can use it. And we had the great satisfaction sometimes of finding some key shots that many people have seen from World War II and realizing there was a color original behind it. That people had seen the black and white, thought that's all there was, but the black and white had been made to put in the newsreels.
Right.
Because newsreels weren't in color, so they'd have to make a black and white copy. They'd stick it in the news. Then that would have a life of its own.
So the original film was
Yeah,
in
when
color.
you trace it back to the National Archives, you might be able to find the original master, and it would be color and sometimes in amazing shape.
And these were done by combat photographers in both the Pacific and
Yeah.
Europe in World War II. And you had directors like John Ford and
all
Frank
these-
Capra. I mean, really amazing stuff.
These guys got involved. Now, it was kind of lopsided. We couldn't, other people have tried to do it with color footage, and I think ours was much better because we didn't try to tell the whole story of the war because we couldn't. There's so much missing. There's no color footage of Pearl Harbor. There's no color footage of important events, and it's also lopsided towards the later part of the war. So we made it more about thematic ideas, like air combat or those things, so we could use the best footage we had because it was really great to, I like to, to dig out interesting footage that's in great shape, and a lot of this color, we were just amazed at what good shape it was in.
You had 4 hours. I mean, you talked about the air war. You talked about the sea war, Anchors Aweigh. You talked about victory in 1945 and covering the war. Must have been a big deal to be a combat photographer. You didn't have a gun. I know even John Ford flew on B-17 bombers. And
yeah, we shoot film, not bullets, and a lot of them died. The casualty rates were extremely high. It was one of the worst positions
to be a combat photographer.
To be a combat photographer was one of the worst jobs to get assigned. You were very unlikely to live through the war. I mean, the guy, for instance, there's you ever see that color footage of the flag raising on Iwo Jima? Everybody knows the black and white, but there is a color.
Yeah.
There was a guy standing there shooting color film.
Right.
And there's a color of the exact same moment. That guy was dead the next day. They never even found his body.
Really?
The guy who shot that. I mean, anyway, that's the whole
remember
point.
that
When you're a cameraman, you're going to get killed if if your pictures aren't good. What the famous line by the most famous war photographer was Capra. What am I saying? Robert Capa, and he said, "If your pictures aren't good, you aren't close enough."
Right.
Well, he was killed in 1954 in Vietnam. So,
Yeah.
and he almost got killed many times before that. So.
Yeah. I remember
So I'm not a combat cameraman myself, but I appreciate that.
A lot of people in Philadelphia were very proud of the fact that that famous photograph of the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima was shot by, I think, Joe Rosenthal, I think his name was.
It was a good photographer. He did a lot of other good stuff, too.
Philadelphia Bulletin, paper doesn't exist anymore, but that's who did it, yeah. But you did a lot of other documentaries besides things that you did. I know for the History Channel, you did something on demolition. But
that was fun. Well,
what was the
this is how
demolition?
these kind of things happen, right? They're bringing in a couple of writer-producers, a series that's going to be about boneyards, which is about, the series is going to be about what do we do with technology when it's worn out? What do you do with old stuff? And it was everything from biomass, like foods and all these different ideas. And then one of them I remember they said was about, well, I got the Army one because I do a lot of military stuff. So they just assigned me, Doug, you're doing the military show. Okay. But then you can pick from these other ones. And then one of them was building demolition. I'm thinking, well, how can if I can't make a great show out of that, I'm in the wrong
Showing
business.
buildings being demolished.
Destroyed. I mean, what fun is that? I said, I want that show. I want to go destroy buildings. I want to go, and we did. We went all over and watched how they'd learned how they destroyed buildings all over the place. We just went to different demolition sites.
Implosion and things like that.
Yeah, though I learned, all these things. Only 10% of building demolitions are implosions, and most are done for different ways.
I always want to know that. I mean, it's amazing.
There's a wrecking ball, Anyway, it was fun because everybody likes. What guy doesn't like to see the wreck stuff?
I can imagine doing a documentary on battlefields, which you did do. But what about the pyramids? How did you do the pyramids?
Well, the idea of that show was how did they build the pyramids? And that sort of shows the difference in the History Channel, because now they have shows like, well, they must have had alien help. It couldn't have possibly been done. Well, I did it years ago when, of course, that's what the show was about. I say, well, you want to know, you made your own show about. I made it about how they did it.
Right.
So it was about, what's the latest thinking on how did they get to the Great Pyramids? And essentially it was, well, they, like anybody, they started small, they had mistakes, they had pyramids that didn't work out too good, and they worked their way up to building that. So that's what it was about. So you can imagine that was a great project, because it was just me and 4 Egyptians in a van driving around, in the desert, filming pyramids. So
and no one shot at you? I mean, you didn't have any problems?
It was super nice. It was great. It was before things had fallen, and my crew was, it was just, 2 of them were Christians. There were 2 Christians, 2 Muslims in my crew. Got along great. They were great guys. They were very nice. I felt very safe. They went out of their way to point out, because I'm carrying a lot of cash, right? That's how things get done over there.
Right.
Say, I'm worried about carrying all this cash. They're saying, don't worry about it. Says, I'll carry it for you. We'll take care of it. Nothing's going to happen. You're good. These are guys. That's all they do is deal with crews. So they got to keep everybody happy. And
sure.
said, don't worry. This is not a country with street crime very much, or these kind of issues. And I enjoyed it with them. My trouble was to get them to take me to Egyptian places to eat and stuff, because they always wanted to go to like Kentucky Fried Chicken or something. They wanted to go to America. They thought I wanted to go to American places. I'm like, I didn't come out here to go there.
Well, you've certainly been in a lot of places. Some of these documentaries that you've done that have been on the History Channel or on A&E or Discovery, have you ever been able to show them again at a place? Have you ever taken?
The rights are a complicated mess. It's meaning who owns it. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like if I was to show it or put it on this thing, somebody whoever owns I know who owns it. It's Disney owns the History Channel. Well, nobody wants to screw on Disney. They love to sue people. That's all they'd much rather do that than make shows. So, they would, I don't know what would happen.
You wouldn't be able to.
But I do occasionally show them and hand them around. It's not a big deal if, it's like, copyright law is its whole world in itself. We all have to deal with it. But in a lot of senses, if nobody's making money, nobody's going to bother you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's on
I
a
guess
smaller scale.
If there's money involved,
shows they would sell. History Channel would sell them. You could, buy the DVDs from them.
Okay.
So in that sense,
That's why they make money.
I don't know if you can still get the Pyramid Show, but you probably can. One funny thing, it was on this series after it had run for a long time, Modern Marvels.
Right.
Well, if a pyramid's a modern marvel, what is it?
Right.
It's only 4,500 years ago. Yeah. I mean, what's left? Yeah. Pointed sticks. That'll be. I thought that was pretty funny.
You've made a lot of other productions too. Everything from Fenway Park and the Red Sox to small farms in America. What's 1 or 2 of them that were your particular favorites?
Well, those 2 were 2 of my favorites, because those were, in those sense, those were two that I originated, and
came up
a
with the
lot
idea?
of the other ones, like on the pyramids, I was like, sure, I'll go.
Somebody
but,
told you what they
it's
wanted
already
to
was rolling.
Right.
It's like a machine that makes these shows, Right. And
but Fenway,
the Fenway Park was I was just working in Boston for Channel 38, which was the TV station, doing on and off stuff and doing photography for them. And it was just like, hey, has anybody ever made a show about Fenway Park? well, no, you know. I said, well, I'll do it. I'll do it. You know, and it was that kind of a station where I could go up to the general, hey, I'll make, okay, sure, you know.
It's one of the 2 oldest baseball parks in America.
Yeah, and so it was, you know, now it's certainly almost over-discussed, but at that time, you know, that was not even long after they had been discussing, maybe we should tear it down and build something modern out here. You know, that was seriously discussed in Boston you know, in the 60s.
But no more.
So, anyway, it was great fun because I got to go around and interview all these old players, many of whom, you know, subsequently passed away. I got to interview this guy, Smokey Joe Wood, who had the best season in baseball history in something like 1915 as a pitcher. I mean, it was amazing.
Very
and
famous.
I got to interview him when he was 96.
Wow.
And he was, you know, go to the house, and this old woman comes to the door. He had been a coach at Yale and then had retired. This old woman comes to the door, and I go, oh, we're here to interview Smokey Joe Wood. She goes, oh, well, come on in. And then she goes, hey, Dad.
Yeah, you know? That's pretty good.
And anyway,
you meet Carl Yastrzemski or Ted Williams.
Well, yeah, I did get a great little exchange in the thing with Ted Williams.
That's great.
Where he talks. I even have a nice still of us with, you know, Ted Williams interviewing. We did this great thing where they had Old Timers Day, and so all these players would come, and they'd even be in uniform, and all you'd do is just go around one to one, you know, and just shoot your brains out, and I'd come out with all this great stuff, you know, from these guys because they like talking about Fenway. You know, they always had, all of them had something to say that would be interesting.
They all have moments and memories. I mean, of course. And when you shot small farms in America, that give you a greater appreciation for small farms.
That came out of my grandfather was an ag engineering professor at Ohio State for his whole career. This is my dad's dad. And he was always an advocate for the small farm, and that the small farm was the efficient farm, not just nostalgia purposes, that they were much more efficient than corporate farms, but corporate farms had the clout and had the government doing their bidding, and so we made a film about how small farmers are more efficient than, in many ways, it's all how you measure efficiency, than big corporate farmers, and that was the theme of the show. Back then that was a pretty radical idea, but one of the examples people around here might appreciate, we used many examples from the Amish about things that they do that are actually particularly efficient.
Sure.
And you know, they survive. They do. You know, they, in their terms, they're doing good, and they can farm land nobody else is farming.
Right.
And most people don't realize they're not afraid. They use a lot of chemicals actually, but which most people don't realize. But anyway, I was just interested in the, you know, that idea of how farmers could you know, need to realize their own efficiencies and profit from it.
Oh, I understand. That's great. In the 1 minute that we have left, do you have any advice to the young people who are interested in being filmmakers or photographers out there? Because we have at Chautauqua a lot of people who are interested in learning.
Well, I can give you the key advice is just, these days, is just to be out there doing it. You just have to do it. You know, there's always money restrictions. All I can say is today they're much less than they were. You know, it used to cost us much more. And in my world, in documentary, has been so impacted by digital because it's eliminated the cost of film, which used to be our biggest expense. So I would say to everybody that does ask me, I say, well, why aren't you shooting that now? Why don't you just start putting it together? Just start putting it, evolve it, work it.
Right.
Just start doing it. That's how you're going to find out. Because you learn best by doing. I mean, you study, but you learn best by doing.
Sure. No, it's, we believe in lifelong learning at the Chautauqua Institution. But
Chautauqua's a good place for somebody like me who's a little bit everything.
Absolutely. You know? Well, we really appreciate having you here today. It's been a special treat. The half hour has gone by really fast. But I just want to remind everyone again that Douglas A. Miller has been our special guest. His website is Doug A. Miller, no dots, just DougAMiller.com. One word, DougAMiller.com. Take a look at his website. You'll see a lot of wonderful, wonderful photographs. And Doug, thank you again for being here. It's been a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it.
Interesting.
And
enjoyed it.
Good luck the rest of the summer.
Yes. Driving back to L.A.
Okay, bye-bye now. Bye-bye, everyone.